Why do so many medical devices fail? Not in the lab, but in the real world, long before they ever reach patients. Welcome to Industry Ignited, the podcast where we explore the leaders, decisions, and innovations shaping the future of industry. I'm your host, Dr. Leeanne Aguilar. And today I'm joined by Lisa Voronkova, CEO of Ova Solutions and author of Hardware Bible, Build a Medical Device from Scratch. Lisa, welcome to the show.
Hi, very happy to be here.
I'm excited for our conversation today. Thank you for being here. Now, you started as a medtech founder yourself before building Ova Solutions. What problem did you experience firsthand that ultimately led you to create an external R&D team for other founders?
Oh, that's a great question. And actually, we started as a typical founder story. So we built a company around the technology we invented. So it was in 2016, 2017. So we developed an sensor for health monitoring, which was more accurate than optical sensors that were on the market back then. So some optical sensors were not performing on a darker skin or tattooed skin or hairy skin. And so we designed this technology and we were super excited about it. But then we hit a wall that nobody talks about in medtech. So our sensor was not integrated into care pathway properly.
Oh,
So we were building the company starting from the technology, not from the problem. And I
uh-huh.
think it's the most typical mistake first time founder can make. At the same time, a friend of mine had an engineering team in Ukraine and they were going through exact same thing. So they stopped working on their product development. And instead of dissolving both teams, we merged these companies and shifted our entire business model. So we stopped trying to build our own product and started helping other founders to build their products. And it was like 9 years ago, almost 10 years ago. And so now when I see startups coming to me with sensors or technology in general, I immediately know what would be the problem.
Uh-huh.
And I think that helps me to speed up the product development and product go to market based on our mistakes.
Yeah,
Because both me and my co-founders, they were on the founder's seat, right? So we know
right.
what it feels like.
Absolutely. And I've heard that over and over and over from other founders and CEOs as well, that failure is the best teacher. And we learn best from our mistakes and then are motivated at that point to succeed. And we understand, we have a really deep understanding at that point of what it, means to fail and then what you need to succeed as well. So it's a great learn or you learn so much from failure, basically.
You see, if we already wasted our life on doing something, our founders or like our clients can not repeat this mistake. So it would make sense if we can like cut corners somewhere where it's possible.
Yeah, absolutely. So those other founders don't have to reinvent the wheel. They don't have to learn from mistakes that have already been made. They can leverage themselves with your knowledge and experience. So that's, I think, extremely valuable. Yeah. Now, your company operates globally with engineering teams in Ukraine and business leadership in New York. How did you build trust, quality, and scalability in a distributed model, especially in a highly regulated industry?
To be very honest, I didn't build it from scratch, right? I didn't have to build it from the very beginning. It was not always like that. The team was not distributed at the beginning. So I'm in New York for just 3 years, almost 4 years. And before that, I was in Ukraine for the entire time. We were building team on the ground. We were working next to the engineers. So the core team is still the same for all this year. So we know each other for a long time. So we were going through a lot of projects together. We were dealing with manufacturing problems together. And when I talk to clients now, I'm not just saying, well, that there's a distance team elsewhere, that I manage remotely, because it's not the case. And also three other co-founders, there are four co-founders in the company, and three other co-founders are in Ukraine. So they're also managing the team locally.
Yeah.
But I
Right.
think what really builds trust with new clients is our track record, because one, we are mentioning that we've built over 200 by now different devices, and most of them are in clinical trials or in the market. Well, it proves that we already executed with someone else.
Yeah. Wow. So you've been together for 9 years, you said already? And
With some a bit more.
Oh, okay, alright. And then you've worked on over 200 devices so far?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. Yeah, so that is a solid track record there, and so, right, I think that in itself, builds trust with clients. Now looking back, what was the most difficult transition for you personally, from founder to CEO of a fast-scaling engineering organization?
To be very honest, it might sound a bit cocky, but the hardest part was accepting that I was wrong about something I believed deeply in the very beginning. Because, as I believe most engineers, I thought that managers were useless, that salespeople were useless. And I think most engineers think that, by the way. So, especially talented ones, they don't think like, well, they would help to sell my work. They think like, why do we need all these project managers? Why do we need all these
Ah.
coordinators? They don't actually build anything, right? And then I became one of those useless people, right? So this transition forced me to see that building great products and building a great company are completely different skills. So
Right.
before I could design a device, I could do simulation by myself, I could review code, but now the task is different. Like I was questioning myself and I was educating myself again. And I, in fact, realized that, okay, I know nothing in this space. So I need to read more business literature to understand how can I help 60 engineers work together effectively. How do I
Mhm.
identify who is about to get a burnout before they quit, for example? And can I spot what is off with the client relationship and so on? So I had to learn all that.
All the people skills is what I'm hearing.
I would say so, yes. And also how to build a sales team, for example, was also challenging
Mhm.
for us because I always had this mindset before running this company that I would just hire someone and they would execute for us. But
Mhm.
in fact, you can hire someone after you did your homework. And well, I also learned it hard way.
Yeah. So what did you learn when it comes to, like, building a sales team? Then what was your biggest takeaway there?
Be very, very specific about who is your client and how to reach out to them in a way that they would not discard it right away as a sales pitch.
Mhm.
Because at some point, if you were in the conferences and you know how salespeople approach, in most cases, you feel them like a white noise. You see their card, you see that they're a sales team, and they're like, "Oh, okay."
Yeah.
So probably our approach is to build friendship and build connection with the client. That is why, for example, for most potential clients and for most people who are reaching out to us, even though they're not directly our clients, we are providing free hardware consulting. Because
Oh, okay.
after, well, this is a bit deeper story, maybe a bit negative, that after war started in Ukraine, we realized that we don't want to live in vain and we want just to help other people to build great products with or without us. So that's like a mission that we have for last 4 years in the company. We charge for our engineering expertise when
Mhm.
we do something, but we don't charge for advice. And I've been very transparent when, for example, I work as a mentor in Vanderbilt University. I've been very transparent about the FDA pathway, about the reimbursement pathway. I'm not trying to make it sound more complicated than it is, as people sometimes do when they're trying to sell you something. I'm just trying to share whatever I know on the subject and being like very open to say that, well, I don't know something about this topic, so this you should figure out by yourself or something like that.
Yeah. Alright, so I'm hearing you like you really became a an advocate for your clients, really, and empowering them by sharing your knowledge and giving them advice, but then not making them completely dependent on you, but also letting them know where you can help and where you are there for them, but being willing to help them even if it's not something you're charging for.
That's true. So there's just one thing that we are focusing on, and one thing we're charging for is a hardware development. But we're not trying to also take money for consultancy or for building an FDA pathway or building a reimbursement strategy. But still, we can give at least preliminary advice on that.
Mhm.
if we already had experience in this field with other clients.
Yeah. Now you've worked with class 1, 2, and 3 devices from wearables to OR equipment. Where do founders most underestimate the complexity of taking a device from prototype to market?
I would say one of the biggest gap, at least from our perspective, from engineering's perspective, is to understand that manufacturing is not just scaling the prototype. Design for manufacturability is usually different process than just producing 20 or 50 prototypes because you have to optimize for a specific production line. You have to be aware of what components are out there, what is their delivery time to your factory, how you're gonna certify these products, how you're going to deal with maybe some production mistakes and so on. And I would say from engineering point of view, that's the biggest mistake. From business point of view, the biggest mistake is to think that, well, FDA approval is the final step. And I also heard that a lot.
Mhm.
So I would say that FDA approval is just the beginning. And the final step, or rather a milestone, because then there would be like more steps, is to understand how to bring the device to hospital or to someone who's going to pay for it. Because I hear this really often when founders are saying, well, we're going to just sell to a hospital without being very specific. And that's the trickiest part probably for any product.
Right, yeah, you mentioned that before, like, the most startups believe FDA clearance is the finish line, but that's actually a dangerous mindset. So what comes after clearance that catches the teams off guard?
Reimbursement strategy and making doctors use the device, because it also like should play a bit with their ego. And by the way, you also talk to a lot of early stage founders, right? And what, from your opinion, what would be like the thing that makes you think like, oh, they have no idea what they're for?
Well, I mean, I think most of them are learning. I mean, I'm hearing like you mentioned at the beginning, starting with the problem. Starting with the problem is super important. And then but I do see that a lot of them expect to just get bought out right after they create something. I think the end goal is just to get, acquired quickly. Danger I've heard a lot of them is that it takes longer than they think it will, that acquisition, or they might run out of money. Or also when it comes to funding for FDA, when they're, trials, like the trials. So once they reach clinical trials too, that can take a long time, and running out of money is a huge concern. So not being prepared for the clinical trials or, I think it's just expectations overall are not always well established from the beginning. That's what I hear a lot of.
That is true, because even in FDA website there is a statistic that it would take 7 years to bring a medical device from idea to market in average. Like 7 years. That's like half of your life. And some first-time founders or first-time founders in medtech, they think like, oh, just a couple of years, like for consumer electronics, we just build it and advertise and that's it. But also, yeah, I completely agree with you. Also, another thing is clinical adoption, because doctors don't just start using your device because FDA said so. They need
Right.
training, they need clinical evidence, not just your preliminary data, but real world outcomes. So it's really hard to find these first advocates. They need to see other doctors using it successfully, and it will take years and it would take a
Yeah.
lot of money and efforts to bring it there. So, yeah,
Yes, that's true. I've
also
heard that
scary.
too. Yeah, it's scary because at first adoption, yeah, I mean, there's that risk, for first adopters. And so you're right. A lot of times people hesitate because of the risks or potential liabilities that come with using something new and different. So they are comfortable and experienced using what they have. So like you said, they have to be educated and convinced and willing to give it a new device a shot. So that can be, I can see it daunting and right, expensive and take a long time as well. Yeah. So OVA acts as a full external engineering team. When does outsourcing R&D make more sense than building in-house, and when does it not for a company?
Okay, so let me give you frameworks I actually use when founder ask me this, because it's not just a simple answer in my opinion. And in my understanding, outsourcing makes sense when you're pre-revenue and capital constrained. Because if you're a founder, if you have like 500,000 in seed funding. You just cannot afford to hire a full in-house engineering team because good medical device engineer in US is like 200K fully loaded, and you probably don't need that. And you need a mechanical engineer, electrical engineer, you need someone to build the firmware, maybe a regulatory person. So it's around 800K a year, and before they even design something, right? So with us, with our team, you get access to this entire multidisciplinary team, and we charge a fixed price per hour. So basically, you use people once you need them. It's
Mm,
like first
right.
scenario. Second scenario, when you need like really specialized expertise, and you would only use this expertise for a short period of time. So, for example, we have people experienced in orthopedic implants, like very specific expertise, I should say, working with PEEK, working with titanium, or we have people specialized in optics in our team. It's really hard to find these people and maybe engage them in a project for small amount of hours, and with us it's possible. And third category would be when speed matters more than building, you know, knowledge inside of the company. So if you need to speed up the process, well, as I mentioned in the beginning, we've built over 200 different devices. Very likely we already built something similar, so it
Mm,
might help
right.
us to speed up the project development in
Because you have
general.
experience. That makes sense, yeah. So, your clients, are you finding that most of them have tried internally and then they come to you because they get, at a point where they're stuck? Or do they come to you at the beginning of the process when they have a new idea that they haven't built out? I mean, what do you find more of and what's ideal?
We can work with both. For us, it's not a big difference. So sometimes they're coming with proof of concept. So they already figured out that it's like physically possible in this world to build something that they have in mind.
Mhm.
Or sometimes they have just an idea. For example, we had a client, it was a startup inside of the pharma company. So it was a corporate client, but more like a startup. So there's just a group of people was trying to solve a problem on how to address drug delivery. And they had just a list of requirements. So they didn't knew what the device would be, how it would be addressed. They just knew what they want to receive in the end of our cooperation. So we can also work with the clients like that. It's also an interesting way of cooperation when we're not only charging for hours, but also taking a small equity in the project. And
Mhm.
that way, we not only execute on what they gave us as a technical task, but also trying to make it the best in the market,
Oh,
basically.
interesting. Yeah. And I mean, are there times where you take an idea that a client has and partner with them because you see another way to innovate that's even further beyond what they've conceived?
We have three favorite categories where we have like, experts in house who already worked with at least 20 projects in this space. And these three most interesting categories for us would be anything related to orthopedics, starting with an implant, ending with at home rehabilitation, any sort of wearable devices, all the electrodes and how to get a signal from an electrode if you're wearing the device for 8 hours, for 10 hours, because skin can become greasy or sweaty. The signal is not as pure as it was in the beginning. And third category would be any equipment that goes inside of the operation room. So if it's not a biotech, for example, and it's a device that falls into the three categories, very likely we can contribute more than other R&D shops.
Okay. That's good to know. Yeah, interesting. So those are your areas of expertise. So tell me about your book. I know you have a book, Hardware Bible, that is positioned as a book that could save a med tech startup. What knowledge gap did you repeatedly see that convinced you that this book needed to exist?
When I started my mentorship in Vanderbilt University, I was expecting to receive more technical questions based on my position or experience. And I realized that gap in the knowledge was not technical, was more like strategic. So something that
Mm,
we already discussed. Founders think that, well, FD is just a last step for their project development. And in some meetings, I heard people say, well, we just need to get to FDA clearance, then we'll figure out sales later, without being specific. And I think, in my opinion, you have to figure out the value of the products in medtech really, really early to
Hmm.
understand what to build and why to build, if the market is big enough, and how to calculate the real market size and so on. So I've put together this book in a way that it would be beneficial just to take a look at the names of the chapters to understand what to expect and where you have the knowledge gap. Because, well, I mean, I know that I run an R&D shop, so it also benefits me to say, well, the technical execution is not a big deal, or it's not the main thing, but it in fact is not a big deal. Like, we
Hmm.
would likely be able to build something that you have in mind, but will you be able to sell it? That's another question. And I
Right.
try to put it in the written in the book. That's why I wrote it.
Right. Yeah. Like you said, it's not just about engineering, it covers reimbursement, hospital adoption, training, and commercialization. Why do non technical factors often determine whether a device succeeds or fails?
I think the biggest mistake I see is the like lack of understanding that patients are not using medical devices, but healthcare system do use medical devices. So you can build the sleekest, the nicest, the most elegant, I don't know, clinically superior device in the world. And nobody gonna use it if you don't understand how hospitals are making these purchasing decisions, how insurance gonna pay for it, how they're gonna reimburse for it, and how doctors would integrate this device into the care pathway, right? A couple of years ago, we worked on a surgical instrument that was objectively better than existing standard of care. So they were doing like a faster procedure to short the procedure time. They had better outcomes and so on. And then they were not able to sell it, like to scale sales, because they haven't figured out training and adoption of hospitals, of surgeons in the
Oh,
hospital,
right.
because they needed like 3 cases to become proficient with this new technique, and hospitals won't give you 3 cases when existing instrument works fine and surgeons are already trained on it. So they miscalculated the cost of adoption, how
Right.
expensive it would be to train the staff to use the product. Mm, and another pattern I see all the time is reimbursement, as I said. So if you have an FDA clearance, but there is no CPT code for your procedure, or because that was a massive failure. We worked in a project for at home rehabilitation, and they applied for their own HCPCS code and they received the code after 1 year, and the reimbursement was zero under this code. So great success. I mean, was useless. This scary stories all the day.
And why? Why was the reimbursement 0?
Because they didn't manage to prove the value of the device. So they complied with the procedure, but it
Uh-huh.
happens sometimes. Some reimbursement codes are zero or really low, so it doesn't make any financial sense to proceed with the product, even though it's good and beneficial for the patients. But
Mhm.
still, like, what the system has is good enough, and this good enough is the
Right.
biggest barrier of entrance. So, in my opinion, or at least from what I see, most medical device failures are not engineering failures at all. They're business model failures, because
Yeah.
device probably works, but nobody from founders figured out how to actually get it into hands of people who need it and how to get paid for it.
Yeah, exactly. So marketing, I think, is a big part of it, training, like you said, and just calculating the cost of all of that into the overall project and making sure it's worth it. Like you said, is there a way to figure out if it's reimbursable beforehand?
Good question. Well, I think it's possible to answer this question when we would look at the specific case, because it's
Mhm.
just too broad of a question. But I think the best way to understand is to see, let's say, if we're talking about the device for rehabilitation, the one I mentioned, they after all managed to integrate the device into a care pathway. how
Hmm.
they took a look at all the negative outcomes that might appear as a result of people not using their device and calculated how much is the loss for every outcome and how likely this loss is going to happen. And then their reasoning was different. The reasoning was, okay, you're losing that much money now because of not using our device, and we are
Uh,
willing to save you half of it or
yeah.
25% of it. Like, let's risk and do pilot together and figure out how much we're actually saving. Because some outcomes can appear in 1 year after the surgery, for example. So it's like a very long study.
Right. So they finally demonstrated the long-term savings and the total cost savings ultimately. So you're also launching a newsletter for medtech founders. Tell me a little bit about that. Like what kind of insights are you hoping to deliver that founders aren't getting from accelerators or investors?
So, as I mentioned earlier today, we now have this belief that information should be open because it's already hard enough. I'm already confident that we have this experience and knowledge that if we would tell to someone what to do, it's very likely they would still hire us because we know how to do this exactly.
Yeah.
So building medical devices already hard enough without people gatekeeping knowledge behind expensive consultant fees or telling you to trust the process without explaining what the process actually is. Because I also noticed that some founders recently were complaining to me that they hired an independent consultant and their advices were not very specific. So it's like, when you go to a psychologist
Hmm.
and they're not coaching you, they're asking you questions like, what do you think would be the best approach in your case? So it means there's no specific advice on how to do certain things, even though it's not a big deal to just share how to get things done. So advice is like, oh, just be happy. They're not specific enough. And
Right.
you're basically taking all the responsibility yourself as a founder. So I try to put some tips in this newsletter to make it easier to maybe be a bit more clear about certain processes, or once again, like to understand what is the process in general and where is the knowledge gap. I'm writing for engineers, for founders, for investors who need to understand the technology. And I'm writing every other week. So every other Tuesday.
Okay, every other Tuesday. I was gonna ask how often you're releasing it. Okay, great. And I know you're shifting focus from early stage startups to more established medical companies as well. What does that say about where the medtech industry is headed?
From what I see, the early stage market got saturated. So, too many startups are chasing the same problems with similar technology. And that means that funding for them became a bit harder. Also, like critically, regulatory commercialization complexity didn't go away, it just got worse. So, you have a lot of early stage company just stuck in the valley of death between FDA clearance and actual revenue. Meanwhile, established medical device companies, the one with revenue, with hospital relationship in place, with regulatory infrastructure, they have different problems
Mhm.
because they need innovation, but they can't build it fast internally because their R&D teams are maintaining existing product lines, right? So
Oh, okay.
they already have the regulatory burden, public companies, so they can't take huge technical risks. And we see this like as an opportunity for us, like this shift where established companies are essentially outsourcing their innovation. And for us, it's just maybe a better business.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's more sustainable and probably working with higher level problems as well, or problems that are more complex that are more fun to solve, perhaps. Or like, because you said that a lot of them in the early startups, those are problems that you've already seen that other people are already solving, and so those in the mid level are bringing on new challenges, perhaps.
I should say that this classic garage startup story, it works
Hmm.
the best in software where you have just two founders and you can code something then execute on it. But in medtech, to go through all the stages and to last for at least 7 years, you need capital, you need regulatory expertise, you need decent relationship with manufacturing and understanding the reimbursement in general. So established companies, they have most of that. They just
Hmm.
need the engineering execution and maybe some specialized expertise, which is exactly what we are doing.
Yeah. But your book, is it focused more towards beginning startups, startups who haven't been through the process before? It's geared more
Correct.
towards that
Yes.
audience? Okay. All right. So it's like once they've been through it a couple of times and then they can come to you and you'll be better or they'll be better equipped to man or get your help to go through the process.
I would say so. Yes.
Yeah, okay. Let's see. So with wearables, predictive diagnostics, and AI-driven devices advancing quickly, where do you see the biggest opportunity and biggest risks in the next 5 years?
Well, everyone now is talking about AI for the last couple of years, and of course, it's extremely powerful. But in medical devices, I think the opportunity isn't in building some general purpose diagnostic AI, in my understanding, just my opinion here. The opportunity is in using AI to make existing devices better,
Mm,
cheaper, or possible at all. So I personally see real value in AI that compensates for hardware limitation. For example,
yeah.
you can build a simpler, like cheaper sensor with fewer sensors, fewer channels, and then use AI to reconstruct the full signal. It's, for example, like talking about wearable devices like Apple Watch can detect like arrhythmia with a single lead CCG instead of a
Mhm.
12 lead, like a standard one.
Oh,
So
wow.
there's an opportunity now in the market because regulatory pathway is getting more clear, and the FDA now have this predetermined change control plan,
Mhm.
this framework. So you can build devices that improve over time with new data. And just a year ago, it wasn't possible. So there are almost 1,000 of AI-enabled devices on the market already, and it's not like future or it's not theoretical anymore.
Yeah. Wow, and so how have you integrated AI in your R&D process?
Oh, we work with it a lot, and we work mostly with AI implemented in the device. So
Mhm.
we don't do software typically, and we integrate it in their devices. We have a lot of experience with optical recognition and visual systems in general. And there's, in fact, a huge opportunity for us because established medical device manufacturers, they don't have AI expertise in house. They have mechanical engineers, they have regulatory people like quality systems, but they don't have ML engineers who understand both the algorithms and medical device regulatory requirements. So we position to be that bridge because we have understanding of both.
Okay, so more value that you bring to potential clients in the AI understanding and integration, and awesome. So, Lisa, finally, for a founder or physician with a brilliant idea but no roadmap, what is the single most important question they should ask before building anything?
Well, I think everything that we discussed would just summarize into one question to understand who will pay for this device and why they're going to pay it. Not
Mhm.
will the device work, not is the technology cool enough, because those are engineering questions and they are extremely easy. Extremely easy compared to one real question: who is going to pay for it? Is it a hospital? Then why? Is it a patient? Is it an insurance? I don't know, a value-based care program. So each of those has completely different requirements for what they'll pay for and how much and what would be the reasoning why they pay. Does it save money? Does it improve outcomes enough to justify the cost of the device? Does it reduce readmissions? Does it fit into an existing reimbursement code? And if yes, why would you replace the existing solution? Or do you need to create a new reimbursement code and then why?
Right.
So I think, yeah, that's the most important question because I've seen a lot of devices that work perfectly. They solve real clinical problems. They have FDA clearance and they failed because nobody figured out who would pay for them and why they're going to pay for them.
Right. Yeah. That's brilliant insight. I know I have not heard anybody talk about that before that I can think of, but you're right. You want to think of, I mean, it's not only if the device works and who it's going to help, it's yeah, who's going to pay for it. And is it reimbursable? Because if it's especially if it's an expensive medical device, the customer, the client, the patient themselves may not be able to afford it. And so at that point, they would expect insurance to come in and pay for it. But if it's not reimbursable, then it might not be marketable, or
Absolutely.
patients might not be able to purchase it. Wow. So, Lisa, thank you for sharing your insight and for demystifying what it really takes to bring medical devices to market. For listeners who want to learn more about your work, your book, or your newsletter, where can they find out more?
On my LinkedIn page, or my book is on Amazon. So yeah.
All right. And again, it's the hardware Bible. And what's the entire name of the book?
Hardware Bible Builds a Medical Device from Scratch by Lisa
Okay,
Voronkova.
there you go. So for listeners, please check out Lisa's book. And is it available in just in print, or do you have it audio as well?
I don't have audio yet, but requests so often we still haven't done that. But I should say that I think for digital versions should be for free. And there's also a physical copy of the book.
Okay, great. And so, for those listening, if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe and share it with those in your network. Until next time, stay bold, stay curious, and keep igniting industry.